Reynolds. I'm chair of the Bitterroot Climate Action Group. It's lovely to be with you tonight. BCAG is a 501c3 nonprofit in the Bitterroot Valley, Ravalli County, Montana, formed in 2019. We have about 120 members and over 300 on our Facebook follow. We're working with a number of goals around education, planning for and mitigating climate change, and advocating for policy changes. I wanted to mention a book club that's starting up. First meeting's on November 10th at 6 p.m. with this book, All We Can Save, Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis. And this is a series of essays by scientists, poets, and others, all women, 50 essays, with a really interesting take on what we need to do about climate. And this will be facilitated by Shoyana Burrows, one of our members, and it's in conjunction with Chapter 1 bookstore in Hamilton. So if you're interested, there's more information on our homepage, bitterrootcag.org, or you can just call Chapter 1 and they'll send you the Zoom link. This will be on Zoom. That's November 10th at 6 p.m. So hope to see some of you there. And so without further ado, I want to introduce Curtis Shuck from the Well Done Foundation. Curtis has worked in the oil and gas industry since 1982, first as a roughneck up on the Alaska oil fields, grew up in Anchorage. He's worked in the port industry and Port Angeles and other places, working with transportation of oil and gas and byproducts. And more recently in North Dakota, in 2017, he started a consulting business and has worked with the Port of Northern Montana up there. He started the Well Done Foundation in 2019, and their motto is capping one well at a time. He's going to tell you about how all this got started and what it's like to take on the job of keeping methane out of the atmosphere from these orphaned wells. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Curtis. Curtis, welcome. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Peter, thank you so much. And Kat, Tilly for tracking us down and reaching out. And it's been a lot of fun getting to know you folks from the Bitterroot Valley. And, you know, it's a super important job that you guys are doing and that we're all doing. You know, I guess the good news is that we're all in this thing together. And so every little bit counts and every lot bit counts. And, you know, you never know. I certainly can relate, you know, when we were looking at this back in 2019, and I'll go into a little bit of that history, but, you know, so often it's, you know, how do you judge success? And I think success is really, hopefully, through inspiration and really encouraging others and enabling others to take action and get involved. Is because you know, as ourselves, we're limited in our scope and capability, but as we partner and grow, then, you know, we're able to do some amazing things. So anyway, I applaud you guys, and I know that I had put the note out there before, but I definitely would love to invite all of the members of the Bitterroot Climate Action Group to come and visit us sometime up here in Toole County and Shelby. Come and hang out with us in the field for part of a day. We'll buy you lunch and show you what we're doing. And it's fun to be able to put hands on and see, you know, for yourselves what's going on. And so anyway, so that we'll talk more about that, but we want to make sure that we absolutely extend that invitation. And likewise, I'd love to come down and see what you guys are doing as well. So I definitely spend a lot of time on the road. Right now, I'm averaging about 5,000 miles a month. So I guess it's good that we have an emission reduction program. You know, part of it's just to keep myself balanced, I guess, right? So, but anyway, so let's get started. This is going to be a little bit about the Well Done Foundation and what we're involved in, where we started, and where we're going, and sort of lessons learned along the journey. The image in the middle of the screen there with the tanks and that little orphan well that's kicking about out there was one of the very first images that I came across, or one of the very first areas that I was involved in here. I'm trying to get here we go, we're working now. Where I came across an orphan well, and you know, interestingly enough, being in the oil and gas business in Alaska and in the midstream area and along the West Coast, and even in North Dakota, I really wasn't aware that orphan wells were even a thing until I got up into Toole County, Montana, and was out in the field one day with a bunch of farmers, and we were talking about, you know, finding a better way for them to get their grain to market. And I happened across an orphan well, and literally could not believe my eyes. I had no idea that that was even a thing, and I was embarrassed. And as you know, an industry professional, I was aghast and horrified by sort of the implication of that, and that really marked the journey. That was July 24th of 2019, and for me, that was certainly a day that I'll never forget, because that whole ride home from Shelby back to Bozeman was spent talking to my wife on the phone, and securing domain names, and putting the plan together, the framework of what the Well Done Foundation was to be all about, because I just felt inspired that important for us in this journey is that we're maintaining a working relationship across a broad spectrum of constituents, and by that we have what's called a triple bottom line, and our triple bottom line includes a stool that has 3 legs, and the 3 legs are comprised of community, environment, and industry. And the reason for that is that we need each one of those 3 to be engaged and supportive in order to be successful. And so a lot of the work that we do in that phase 1 there, the orphan well identification, is really you know, finding the well physically, working with the surface owners, discovering the background of each individual well. And you know, one of the things that I found as have been engaged in that process has been fascinating, the history of these oil producing areas, not only here in Montana, and we're currently working in what's called the Kevin Sunburst field, and you'll see some maps here in just a little bit, which is one of Montana's legacy fields, second oldest field in Montana. First well was drilled in 1921. So we're literally working on wells that are nearly 100 years old. And they come with, like I said, this robust history of jobs and economic vitality, you know, really part of the spirit that helped to build the West. And so we want to be certainly respectful of that. It's also critical that we learn about the characteristic of the well. The detailed information on the geologic formation, the work that was done, I will tell you, we're actually quite fortunate here in Montana on our pilot project because a lot of those records generally exist. Now, not in great detail often, but at least there's something there. We're working in areas in Pennsylvania and Ohio and New York right now where no records exist. In fact, it's literally we're helping the states there find new orphan wells, which is a little counterintuitive. It's like we're supposed to be taking the wells off the list, not putting new ones on, but there is that prolific. So Montana is a little more organized, I guess, which has been good. And it's very helpful because even with that information, as we'll talk about as we're moving forward here, these wells can be quite unpredictable and have absolutely a personality of their own and a mind of their own as we're doing our work. And so what's interesting then, as we identify these potential target wells, then we take them to the next step then, which is the orphan well qualification, where we actually start to do some more detailed testing and analysis and monitoring, and you'll see some of the equipment that we use to see if it really fits in directly into our program. Now, our program is specific to greenhouse gas emissions. However, we do look at sort of that broader spectrum, things like water quality, things like community livability, what have you, are also important factors. But primarily, the key indicator for us is in the greenhouse gas emissions. Once we pick a well and we identify it, qualify it into our program, we actually then adopt the well. And when we adopt the well, it's something that's similar to adopting a puppy or potentially a child. There's no give back.
Can you hear it out there?
So it's important to really do our work. We're getting some feedback here. So I'll ask everybody to mute themselves if they're not already. So what? Again, we're in it to win it at that point. And like I said, that's we're not able to give the well back at that point. That we are committed to the process. And so as we do this, you'll see in that particular image there's a funny looking tube that goes on over the wellbore. You'll see in some other photos, we've affectionately named our monitoring chamber Dorothy in respect of the movie Twister. As you guys will remember, if you've ever seen that, Dorothy 4 was the one that actually flew and provided all the data back to the storm chasers. Well, our current version of Dorothy is Dorothy 5, and she's deployed all over the United States right now. So again, and once we adopt the well, we go through the process. We typically have a monitoring program of anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And during that time, we're taking a massive amount of data through the program. And we'll talk about how that works here. And then once we get enough data and we get enough money, then we tee the well up for closure or for plugging and abandonment. That's really the part that's fun and it's very active. You know, the film crews and reporters really love that time because you get all of the roughnecks working and the crew happening, and you got cement and stuff flying all over the place. And but the reality of it is that that's literally about a 2 or 3 day program in the continuum of 12 months. And so while it's great and it's kind of the exciting part, it's a very small portion of the work that we do, but it's important because it's literally the time when we get to turn the gas off. And you'll see in some of our imagery how that works, and it does work. And so then beyond that, after we've plugged the well, using a cement process, which is an industry tried and true program. We've embellished on that and made some improvements, which we'll talk about. Then we go back and we restore the surface, because that's a critical aspect of the work that we're doing. Typically, what I tell our team in this work, our customer is the surface owner, and they are the ones who we have a direct agreement with for access and a direct agreement in terms of the scope of work. And so at the end of the day, we want them to be happy and satisfied with the work we're doing. And, you know, we're about to close next week, actually, in Montana, our 12th well. And that's part of this particular well we're doing is part of a 40-acre tract that had 9 orphan wells on it. We're just to the last of our wells on that, and we'll be restoring the entire surface area. And so of that 40 acres, the farmer had been farming and dodging the pump jacks and then orphan well casings and all of the associated, you know, oil filled trash that was left behind. We'll actually be restoring in that process about 3.5 acres back into active production. So here's just a couple of images of our Montana project and what we see and what I saw when I first ended up out in the field. Literally, you know, open well bores with no protection on them, no mechanical device of, we call it well control, literally just like a straw in a juice box. Some are emitting alarming levels of methane. Some are just a wisp, but still very much of an issue. And so anyway, it's something that we're focused on. And as you can imagine, like today in Montana, we've got over 100 wells that we're actively monitoring and working on. So that's a pretty big territory here in Toole County. Here's a shot of the state, and then our little slice of heaven up here on the eastern slope of the Front Range, just where the Big Sky really gets started. We're about 15 miles from the Canadian border with our particular project in the Kevin Sunburst oil and gas field. Interestingly enough, when this field was first drilled back in the 1920s, early 1920s, of course, that predated any electricity in the area, predated many of the roads in the area. And interestingly enough, the market for this product was in Canada, because that was the only location that had refineries close by that were able to process the product. That quickly changed, and Toole County then became home to several major refineries over the years that again produced hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs. But this was it, you know, back in the day. Here's some great historical footage that we found. At one point in Toole County, and you can see in this particular image, the gray dots that you see there are oil wells. Many of them are inactive, but at one point there was over 6,000 wells in Toole County. And so just crazy numbers. And so anyway, like I said, a lot of history there. This is some of our early mapping of our projects. These are some of the wells that we've been working on. You know, as I mentioned, each one of these wells has its own specific number and history. Because we've got so many wells across the country right now, we're just about at 500 right now across the U.S. We have developed our own, we call it the Well Done Foundation Well Intel platform, where we're mapping and tracking each one of these wells. As you can imagine, each one of these wells has a file with just reams of data in it. And so it becomes a pretty big, hairy beast in the big hurry. So what's awesome, though, is that we're based right here in Shelby, Montana. And we have a team here at our visitor center in Shelby at 333 Main Street that helps to support a lot of the work that we do. And then, of course, a lot of folks on our team work remote from coast to coast, literally from Oregon to New York and from Montana to Louisiana. So we're kind of coast to coast and border to border with our team, which is pretty exciting. This is a shot from our website of the states that we're currently active in. The green states where we either have projects or we're bringing projects online. And then those states that are indicated in white are states that are coming online with us right now. So we've got a lot of work. One of the things that we do, and Peter, I think you appreciate that, is we collaborate with other nonprofits. So other folks who are organized in some of these areas, we then work to collaborate with them. So instead of reinventing the wheel, we look at ways of cooperation. And that's been a very successful model for us and hopefully for our partners as well. You've probably all seen a vision or a view like this driving through, eastern Montana or somewhere on the other side of the Rocky Mountains. And we certainly appreciate this. This is a view that was taken last summer. And this is literally off of my telephone camera, looking at an orphan well there open to the atmosphere. And this is us using what's called an OGI camera that has a specific methane filter on it. And you can see through this particular lens then the methane emissions that are coming out of this particular well. Interestingly enough, we've since have adopted this well, of course, and brought it into the Well Done family and are monitoring it currently. Remember, when we adopt the well, one of the first things we do is place one of those chambers over that well. So that helps to slow the methane release down. But this is one of the things that we call our smoking gun video, because again, methane is invisible typically to the naked eye. And so by showing regulators and showing our supporters, some of the disbelievers, these images has been really powerful and really important. This is a shot that we took actually just today, and I wanted to throw this out there so you can see. I did mess up the date on the camera, so it's really not 2022 yet, so it's not Groundhog Day, but this was an open well today, and again, using that similar imagery, you'll be able to see once I get in focus here, the amount of methane that's coming out of that. Interestingly enough, with this particular well, this is one that we're just analyzing right now to bring into the family. But it's emitting significant amounts of methane gas. And of course, as you all know, methane is 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And so pretty quickly, those impacts add up. And so it's important for us then, once we start to identify wells, this is a well that's a little bit more robust. We've actually have already plugged this well. Some of these are emitting gas at just significant levels. Like the well we're plugging next week on Wednesday is currently emitting about 60 cubic feet per minute. And so we've actually accelerated that well in the process for plugging. We have some mechanical control on it, by the way, because we're not going to just let that well sit there and rip into the atmosphere. But when you think about the work that we're doing in Montana and the work that we're doing across the US, sometimes we hear from disbelievers or folks that aren't super supportive of the work that we're doing, of like, it doesn't matter, that's just one well, it's just emitting a little bit, and no big deal. Maybe you got a couple wells and they're emitting a little bit, but realistically, what's the big deal? Well, as you all know, this is a game of cumulative impacts. And so once you start to add up all of this emission from orphan wells, not only in Montana, but across the US, across the US today, there's estimates of more than 3 million. We've been more conservative on our website. We talk about 2.15 million, but there are so many orphan wells out there. And like I said, in some states, we're literally finding them every day. So quite alarming. And these are some of the tools that we use initially early on in the identification process. And typically when we're around a wellbore, the interesting thing is, while methane is typically odorless, methane in its pure form is odorless. Methane, when it's associated with other gases like carbon or like hydrogen sulfide, H2S, or even crude concentrates of other natures, it starts then to pick up that same aroma. So you'll have an opportunity when you come to visit us here in the oil patch that you'll be driving down the road and you can literally smell the methane gas, or the gas then that is working along with the methane. So, and when you can smell it at that distance, then that should give you a pretty good indication in the levels of concentration that we're talking about. The wells that we're currently monitoring have a methane concentration of anywhere from 200,000 parts per million to 700,000 to 800,000 parts per million. So pretty potent. And that's pretty crazy in terms of, when you think about that and you think about the amount of emissions. So this is a little bit of science behind our Dorothy, or our, we call it the DFC, the dynamic flux chamber. Again, like I said, we use this to help to contain the fugitive emissions that are coming out. It's not by any means an airtight or any kind of a pressure vessel. It's really meant to act as a standardized platform of measurement across our ecosystem. And so there are these units in Montana, there are these units in New York and Ohio and Pennsylvania and Louisiana. And they're popping up all over the place, and it's pretty awesome to see that. It's kind of a trademark program of us, the colors that we've got on there. And so the way that that's meant is it's meant to capture that methane gas and give us an opportunity safely to be able to study that. Now, I would tell you methane gas is combustible, especially at the concentrations that we're talking about. So safety is always at the forefront of our activities. This is some of the testing equipment that we do use in the field here in Montana and other places. So starting from just some real quick analysis on the left to a more robust system that's located on the right. The system that's located on the right is one that gives us a data point every 15 seconds. And you're going to get a chance to see what that looks like in a screenshot here in just a minute. But like I said, so we're managing literally thousands and thousands of data points every day from these many wells that we have under monitoring right now. And so that data has to get collected and put into a file and uploaded into the system. And again, each of these wells is, has its own personality. You'll get a chance to see that here. This is one that we plugged last summer. This is one of the teams that was out monitoring literally just days before we plugged this well. You can see we've got a gas camera on this particular one. We've got the vent open because we're running a particular test on it. You can see the methane gas then that's wafting out of that particular well. And then this is one of the instruments that we use for measuring here, and this gives you an indication of the cubic feet per minute that are coming out of that particular well. So we've got teams that are in the field across the country that are performing these various measurements. We've been working with a number of volunteers. We are collaborating with education. We have an office in State College, Pennsylvania at Penn State University, where we're working with their Earth and Mineral Sciences Department. We're working right here in Montana with Montana Tech. In fact, we had an intern with us all summer who was participating with us in multiple plugs this year. And we're starting to work with other colleges and universities as well. What's exciting about this is that we feel very strongly that we are literally on the verge of this new opportunity and this new program for employment in this particular space, in the orphan and abandoned well monitoring space. There's a lot of talk about transition from oil and gas to renewables and other types of cleaner energy sources, and what to do with the oil and gas workers, right? Well, certainly, this is one of those areas, but even more importantly is the work that we're doing on the measuring and monitoring side, because these are jobs that are real in a field that's emerging quite quickly, that doesn't take a doctorate to get out in the field and do this. I tell people all the time, this is not nuclear fusion by any means. This is literally plumbing, and getting out there and doing the work we're doing is critical. And so we're working with these colleges and universities right now in developing curriculum for some of these folks who are in, for instance, the petroleum engineering schools right now, who have got to be scratching their head thinking, what am I getting myself into here as far as the future? So it's a great opportunity to get people out in the field. This is some of our teams here, and the picture on the left is we've got folks from Yale University that were out with us this summer, all the way to Montana Tech on the right-hand side. And the gentleman in the center of that photograph is an Olympic alpine ski racer who represents Well Done on the global stage. And the picture on the right, as you can see, is these guys hard at work out there in the field this summer, measuring as we're getting ready to plug that well. So, it's fun to get out there and get these folks involved, hands-on. This is some of the early emission monitoring and reporting that we did, literally back in the day. This was in late 2019 and early 2020. This was the first well that we plugged, which was the Big West Anderson number 3. Plugged that on Earth Day, actually, of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. As you can imagine, everybody was on lockdown, and we had to get the crew out of Hawk and get them out into the field. And this was the initial report that we prepared on that project. And this is a shot of the data that we're collecting right now. So this is the system that we're currently using, as I mentioned, that's collecting data points every 15 seconds and is sending it up to the cloud, and it's being recorded in a third-party platform. And this is what we're getting. So what's interesting in this particular graph, the large graph on the top there, is that blue line, which is not linear by any means, is the actual methane emission. And you can see that these wells have very much of a personality. And so they're kind of all over the place. And there's that particular data set that you see, there's about a 24-hour data set. And there's all kinds of activity going on during that period. So that's why it's super critical that we're collecting multiple data sets over a period of time, so that we can deliver, or develop, I should say, an average emission factor for the well. Now, as we're measuring and monitoring these orphan oil and gas wells, we are collecting two specific types of data. The first is certainly emission. So that's the amount of flow that's coming out of the well. And the second is the concentration of that gas. So how many parts per million in the particular sample that we pull off. The air samples that we pull, the concentration samples, all go to a third-party lab for analysis. And this data, that platform that we're using currently, is also monitored or developed by a third party. And the reason for that is it's just data security and data integrity. You know, one of the things that's critical in this particular race that we're in right now is to be able to quantify the good work that we're doing in such a way that people can relate to it and have confidence in the data that we're producing. These are some shots of some of the folks that are working with us out in the field. On the left over there, actually that's the current mayor of Shelby, who's running the camera going downhole and helping us to figure out how come we can't get to the bottom in that particular well. Interestingly enough, as you can imagine, 100 years goes by, farmers drop rocks, you know, things fall in, God knows what's going on in there. So we need to do that downhole due diligence. The photograph in the center there is some of the work we do with some of our instrumentation to get ourselves to the bottom of the well. With the records that we have to be within a certain range of the bottom to satisfy the state inspector, who's a fellow on the top right up there, along with my father. And they are the ones that oversee the work that we do. And so this has been a collaboration with the state of Montana Board of Oil and Gas, and we're super excited to have them at the table with us. Of course, you know, to date, we probably saved the state of Montana upwards of $500,000, and so we're pretty excited about that. And but with that comes, again, this level of collaboration with the state and the work that we're doing. This is on the left there is kind of what a typical setup looks like, some of our crews and the equipment that we use in the field. Again, this is the plugging event, you know, that 3 or 4 day plugging program. Of course, you know, not every day in the field looks like this, but this, when we get to this point, it's pretty exciting because that means we're getting ready to put cement down the hole and stop the emission. This was the well that the Washington Post was out reporting on, and the fellow in the orange hard hat there in the center of that screen is a fellow from Bozeman, who was the reporter for the Washington Post that wrote that awesome story that came out in June of this year. On the right is the plan that we present to the state, which is our plugging plan. And that essentially is a blueprint for the work that we're going to do subsurface. Again, not everything works according to plan. Of course, these wells are you know, about 1,500 feet deep. This particular one there is about 1,446, it looked like. But, you know, there are things that are going on subsurface that we really don't know about. You know, one of the things that happened is back in the day, apparently there was a fellow named Nitro Charlie that ran around up there and here in northern Montana with nitroglycerin and and a plunger and a torpedo that they would drop down the hole. That was the early days of hydraulic or fracturing or fracking, as they called it. So they literally, some of these wells had hundreds, literally hundreds of quarts of nitroglycerin exploded subsurface, and then they would bail. So what happens is that we end up using the plan that was initially provided, but we have no idea what's happening down subsurface at the bottom. And so sometimes there can be these glory holes. And the reason I say that is because while typically we have a 2 to 3 day plugging event, we actually had a well this year that we were on for 21 days, trying to get the thing to heal up and get enough cement down it to be able to come up the wellbore with our balanced plug. We finally got it. Of course, that was our Earth Day well this year. And we're super thankful. In fact, this year we had a Montana sponsor for that. Pacific Steel and Recycling out of Great Falls was the sponsor of that well, and we're super thankful for the work that they've been supporting us in. This is some of the activity that goes on early on. This was on the right-hand side. There was the first well that we plugged, and this was when we were doing it the hard way. So you see there was about 400 bags of cement that went into this particular well. I probably handled each one of those at least 3 times. And those are like 80 plus, oh, I'm sorry, 94 pound bags. Yeah. So anyway, as you can imagine, that was a pretty rough 3 days on the crew. We've since refined our processes, but that gives you a sense of how much material goes into these well bores to plug these wells. This is a shot of one of the wells late last fall that we plugged, and you can see we've refined our processes a little bit better, and we have been able to again be more efficient in our work and more cost effective in the jobs that we're doing. This is a couple of shots of our crews in the field, and what's important is this image that's on the left-hand side here is our team, myself and one of our interns this summer, that during the plugging process, we'll actually stop the activity so that we can grab a quick sample right at the end, right before we're putting the cement to it. And you can see that pink bag there on the left is actually probably the world's most expensive hefty bag. It's about 150 bucks. It's an anti-static bag, actually. It must be more because it's pink. But anyway, what that is that's a 3 cubic foot bag that we use for measurement. And it's a tried and true and approved measurement process. But what we're doing is we're capturing samples right up until the point that we're putting the first little bits of cement in the hole, because we're continually testing and monitoring these wells to get a handle on the emission factor and the potency, if you would, or the concentration of the gas. Through the process, then, we're continuing to also monitor what the gas is doing. And in each stage of that plugging process, sometimes the gas comes from very low in the formation. Other times, because this casing is so old and has deteriorated just because of the corrosive nature of that gas over almost 100 years, that we're picking up gas from higher up in the formation. And so it's critical that we're continuing to monitor throughout the plugging stages so we know where that gas is coming from and how to adjust our plugging balance as we're coming up out of the formation. So it's a little bit more detail than just slopping cement down the hole. You know, the one thing that is important is when we do place cement, we actually run tubing all the way to the bottom. So we run a string of 2 3/8 tubing. That's why we need the rig that's there that looks like a drilling rig, to run that tubing all the way down so that we place that cement at the bottom, and it's called tree-meeing, where it actually comes up around the pipe, and then we take the pipe up and place more cement, take the pipe up. That way we get an integral plug. We don't have air pockets, and that way it's driving any of the other fluid that is in the hole, oil and water and all kinds of crazy stuff, then finds its way to the surface. And so for us, fluids management is a super critical component. Our ability then to manage that fluid when it gets to the surface through using back trucks and disposing of it properly is super critical. This is a couple of great images here. These are the images of when we actually get cement to the surface. That is the time to celebrate, because that means that our work has been effective and we've got cement all the way up that well bore. And yeah, this is when it's time to celebrate. We've been developing a special cement product, and actually Montana Tech is doing a research project with us right now. We've actually introduced hemp hurd, and hemp hurd, industrial hemp hurd, is the kind of like woody part of the plant. And we're working with a company in Fort Benton, IND Hemp, who has just started a processing facility this year. They've been doing some test runs, but we're working with them on this product that we use in our cement mix to help keep the cement where it's supposed to be. And we've actually been using this in other parts of the country as well, and very successfully. So we're excited at the opportunity to not only enhance the cement design, but also have an opportunity to highlight Montana and the Montana agriculture business through the use of this innovative product. So we're pretty stoked about what we're doing there. This is the crew then after we've added cement to the surface. We're pulling the pipe out of the hole on the left over there. And then these guys you see on the right are just filling up the last little bit of that casing at the surface, because as you can imagine, once we pull the pipe out of the hole, we displace that volume and it drops down a little bit. So we want to make sure we get it right up to the top. And that's what that crew's doing over there on the right-hand side. Then the crew goes away and it's left to just us and the backhoe. And we get to go about the hard work of digging out around the wellbore. Then at that point, what we'll do is excavate around the wellbore. As you can see in this photograph on the right-hand side, oftentimes we've got contaminated soil to deal with because, you know, as you can imagine, over 100 years of production, a couple drops may have been spilled alongside the wellbore. So we have to manage the disposal of that contaminated material. And then we'll end up actually cutting off the casing pipes subsurface, and then we'll pour a little bit more cement around. We put a little, what we call a rat slab around it, fill up any displaced area that's left in the casing. And then on the far right-hand side over there, we put a mini testing chamber in. And the reason for that is that the Well Done Foundation has a 10-year post-closure monitoring responsibility, voluntary, I would say, that we have committed to with the regulatory agencies and the surface owner. And so we monitor that well 10 years post-closure. In some of these areas that you can see here that we're working on and doing the surface remediation on, we'll actually take that monitoring tube and cut it off subsurface. This is, again, my dad with the rake there. And we'll cut that down below the surface so that the farmers can continue to farm that area. So it goes down below the seed drill depth. But we monitor that for, again, a 10-year period. We're taking quarterly samples right now. I'm happy to report that we're at 100% success in our projects and the emission rate. So exciting to be able to report that. And then this is what, again, a finished product looks like. This was done, excuse me, this was done earlier this spring. This was actually the Earth Day well that we were on for 21 days. And so we restored the surface, and we're actually rehabbing the soil right now, getting ready. We've got, like I said, one more well to do in this 40-acre spacing. We'll have that done, and the farmer will be planting in the springtime. In fact, interestingly enough, this particular farmer is working with the group out of Fort Benton, and this could be one of the first hemp crops that's grown in Toole County in Montana. So this is our group out in the field out there doing some of the post-closure monitoring. And, you know, it's pretty active in the field. So it's good to get folks out there. And, you know, we have lots of volunteer activities, and these are some of the things that those volunteers can do, is get out there and help us in this post-closure monitoring. And then this is an image that I always share with everyone. And this was literally taken in 2019 on one of the first orphan wells that I had come across. And I can tell you that I still have that same pair of boots, but They got a lot of miles on them since that day in 2019. You know, in looking back on this journey, I certainly wouldn't trade any of it. It's been exciting. It's been frustrating. It's been, amazing, and it's been terrifying all at the same time. But, for us, the message that we want to get out to folks is that, every little bit matters. And so whatever you're able to do is important. Sometimes this issue of climate change seems so overwhelming, and that, anything I'm going to do is insignificant, so why do anything? But what we want to do is inspire people to act and to do something. And that's one of the things that for us in 2019 was really an important foundation of the work that we were doing. It's like, we weren't doing it perfectly by any means, but we were doing it. And when we plugged that first well on Earth Day of 2020, we had a good idea of what we were doing, but we had no clue what we were starting. And, right now we're just in the process of plugging, as I mentioned, our 13th well, overall 12th well here in Montana. And, we've got literally hundreds of wells teed up. And so, the good news is that if you have a thought and you're inspired to do something, that I encourage you to take that step. And even though it's going to be scary and crazy along the way, because if you don't, you'll always think back and wonder what could have happened. And so for me, it's been literally life altering in terms of what I'm doing now, in terms of a career path. I had no idea I'd be sitting here talking to the Bitterroot Climate Action Group tonight. But I tell you again, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. So with that, I will shut up and be happy to take any questions.
Curtis, this is Peter. Thank you so much. Fascinating work you're doing. And I'm inviting everybody to put your questions into the chat, or we can, if you unshare your screen, Curtis, we can see everybody and maybe we can raise hands and stuff. But
sure.
We have a first question here from Kit. What is the cost per well, and what are your sources of funds to pay for that?
Sure. Typically here in Montana, in the field that we're working in right now, the average cost is approximately $30,000. That cost, of course, changes from area to area, depending on depth and depending on complexity of access, complexity of what the surface restoration has to offer. We're very spoiled working in Montana out in the middle of the wheat fields like you saw there, because access is pretty darn easy. You watch a dog run away for a week. You go to places like Pennsylvania where it's very mountainous and very forested. We're finding ourselves in projects there that a large part of the cost of the project is logging, building roads, and just developing a site that you can get modern equipment in. Many of those wells were drilled literally in the 1800s, where they pulled things in by horses, teams of horses. And so now to be able to get in there with this modern equipment, we're literally logging and building roads. And so that is key. And then, but in Montana, it's always great to come back to the prairie and work out here. And, to your question of sources of funding, so, when we first started, and, even today, I mean, I use the analogy of car washes and bake sales. And literally, I mean, the first wells we plugged were out of my own pocket, just to show that we could do it. And then others started to join in and support us. So now we're blessed with various corporate sponsors in different areas. We have folks who are working with us online through various and sundry donations. We are working on what's called a carbon finance methodology as well. We're actually one of the sponsors with the American Carbon Registry of a methodology that will allow us then, and others of course, to calculate the emissions and then be able to trade those offsets, if you would, or carbon credits then, to help us plug more wells. And that's really our mission in that, is to help us then to scale up our work to, we'll still always be at one well at a time because every well is significant and makes a difference. But, in order to really tackle this, we need to step up our game, and that's going to be an important aspect. Will be our ability to use carbon finance. I definitely want to let this group know that to date, we have not accepted a single dollar of taxpayer money, and that's been by design. And not to say that we won't ever, because certainly there will come a time when that's going to be an important component. But we wanted to show that there is a market-based solution to this particular work that we're doing. And it's been a fun journey. But now with the different administration, we're starting to see that there could be some dollars available. In order to scale up, we'll continue, I think, to look at all sources, but to date we haven't. So again, remember, always car washes and bake sales.
Okay, Curtis, we're getting a number of questions put in. Let me feed them to you and see if we can move through some of them. Frank is asking, on a global scale, how significant are uncapped wells, and are other countries doing anything like you're doing?
So that's a great point, because this isn't just a Montana issue, and it's not just an American issue, although we've got quite a number of them. Canada, just north of the border from us here in Alberta, has literally hundreds of thousands of orphaned wells. There's untold numbers in South America and Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe. So globally, this is a huge issue. And what we're finding in some of those images that you saw in the presentation of those open well bores, again, those are not just unique to Montana. They are that way, a portion of those in every jurisdiction that we're working currently, which is, like I said, is a little bit alarming. So I think the answer is that we're not sure what the potential impacts are, but we are sure about is that we can fix it. And that's what's awesome about this, is that it's something that is fixable. And it's just a matter of rolling up our sleeves and leaning into it.
Very good. Here's a question from Laura. What is being done to prevent future orphan well occurrence? And is there any bonding procedure in place to cover costs at the time of abandonment?
Yep, and that's a great point. The orphan wells that we're dealing with right now in the US and in Canada tend to be in what we refer to as a legacy field, and sometimes they're referred to as a stripper field, and the wells are referred to as stripper wells because they're very small producers, marginally producing, a couple of barrels a day, maybe. Essentially economically undesirable, because others that are in this industry, if they felt that there was an opportunity to make a buck, they'd be all over that. And so but these are wells that are at the end of their life cycle, at the bottom of the economic curve. The issue of financial assurance is actually a really important one. Many of the orphan wells that are in place today are the result of companies that have gone out of business for whatever reason, one thing or another, and are no longer viable. And so those wells, then the way that an orphan well comes to be is it literally defaults to the state. They become wards of the state. The good news is that many of the states now have upped their game in the financial assurance department. But what has happened in many states, and again, this isn't just specific to Montana, is that there may have been a well bond that was posted. Of course, typically back in the day, those well bonds were maybe 1/10 to less of the actual cost to plug the well, but there was some level of financial assurance that was there. But then what's happened over the years is that various and sundry other, I'm sure, important projects have come along. Elected officials felt that it was important to allocate those dollars into other spaces. And there you have it. Now this orphan well thing has up till very recently has been everybody's dirty little secret. Nobody has liked to talk about it. In fact, when I first approached the state of Montana, they were, mortified and afraid that I was coming in to file a suit against them for not enforcing their own rules. And of course, obviously, that's not our approach at all, but that certainly was one of the risks. And so, now through legislation, those financial assurance thresholds are going up. There's a lot more regulation on the front end. But, this is a market that's volatile. It's a commodity market. It's great right now when oil's at, $80 a barrel. People are out there doing their thing. But as sure as we're all sitting here today, it's going to be right back down there. And you'll see more people leaving the scene. So there's got to be a lot more work done on the policy side and the regulatory oversight side to make sure that those folks who have that responsibility are taking care of it. And I also want to point out one other thing, and I know I'm rambling a little bit, but there's also a large group of wells that are not in the orphan category, but are classified as what's known as being shut in. And shut in means idled for a period of time. And those are wells too that are also sort of on the cusp, if you would, of becoming potential orphans, as well as many of them have their own level of emissions. And so, while we're talking specifically the Well Done Foundation's focus on orphan wells, there's also a significant amount of work that can be done right now by operators, and it's simply a housekeeping issue. Again, I mentioned earlier, it's not quantum physics. It's literally, plumbing. It's a matter of changing a seal or tightening a gasket to slow the leak of methane and other gases down. And those are the things that I think are sort of coming to light now.
Okay, and Patty asks, how do you see correlating or working with the president's push to cap methane wells that he spoke about during the climate summit?
Well, it's going to be an awesome opportunity for more people to get involved in this work. While the Well Done Foundation has been focused on, building awareness and building the Well Done brand and developing a methodology that would allow for emission calculation and offsets to be monetized, we know that that's not nearly enough. And again, every well doesn't qualify. Every orphan well is not a super emitter and doesn't have enough of a footprint. And that's where, Patty, those programs that are being discussed in Washington are going to be really important in order for us, collectively to stop. Because just because an orphan well may not be emitting methane today doesn't mean it won't in the future if it's left unchecked. And so any open hole needs to be addressed. And so that's where I think those dollars are going to be really important. Also, in fact, we're having these discussions in New York and Pennsylvania right now is that if they're lucky enough to receive, those dollars from heaven or Washington, D.C. or wherever they're coming from, there's also a really important component, as I mentioned earlier, of looking at using that money to help support backbone infrastructure like roads and access into some of these very remote areas to allow then folks to get in there and plug more wells more efficiently and less expensively. And so those are some really large discussions that are happening right now too. But yeah, I mean, again, look, if we're lucky enough to get some more money put into the program, it's just going to help us be more effective. There's, there's so much work out there. It's scary and overwhelming. That's why, again, one well at a time kind of helps us to keep our sanity,
Wow, I guess. And she had a follow-up. Which companies funded the initial plugging of the initial wells that you did?
Sure. So we've had individual donors. We've had corporate investors from Wall Street in New York. We've had oil and gas companies that have come to the table. I mentioned Pacific Steel and Recycling. We've got an innovative company from California that's going to be up with us this next week supporting wells. What's been so, I guess, overwhelming is that it's a very broad range of people that have been inspired to join in this fight. And it's been, like I said, it's very humbling and exciting at the same time. So we are excited that the oil and gas industry is working with us more closely. I think that we're going to see a lot more of that activity in the future, but it's also cool that these companies that understand that, that there is a responsibility in, what's known as the ESG space now to really take some positive action. And what's great about it is that these projects are very clearly ratable, gas on, gas off. We've got good science and measurement behind it. So it's been fun to partner with these folks.
Awesome. Well, that's the extent of the questions in the chat. Does anybody else want to ask Curtis a question? Just unmute yourself. Curtis, most amazing work. And the scope of the problem is most amazing. 2.5 million wells just in the US. Is there reason for hope, do you think, that this problem can be brought under control in a good way?
Absolutely. I think we're showing that every day with, every well that we're plugging, we're making an impact. And so that's the key takeaway, is that it's absolutely something that we can do and we're doing. It's great to get more people involved in it. But yes, every little bit counts. And, we're talking about, not insignificant numbers of global warming, greenhouse gas equivalents or CO2es. Some of the wells that we're plugging right now have an equivalency of the amount of automobiles, for instance, that we would take off the road, and in excess of 1,500 per year. And so, I mean, these are big numbers. There are wells out there right now that, like I said, have scary levels of emission. And so those are obviously our targets. The super emitters are the ones that we're focused on up front. But yeah, we're making a dent. We're making an impact every day. And, I'm excited to get you guys up here. And, we have an open invitation. We'd love to host you whenever it works out, whether it's a group or individuals. You're always welcome to Shelby.
All right. Well, any other questions for Curtis? Curtis, just want to thank you so much. Here's Laura. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, my internet is not good tonight. I've bounced off several times, unfortunately, but I'll listen to the recording where I missed. You mentioned that the industry Curtis is now sort of a bit on board, at least to help with funding. Do you have concerns about, I guess the slang term is greenwashing, that they're going to show off what they're doing as sort of a balance? I don't know, however you want to phrase it. I think you understand what I'm asking.
Oh, I do, and I would tell you that the folks who we're working with are genuine in their the commitment of support with us, and the reason why they're participating in the program. And and of course, and just like in any industry, you have this broad spectrum of from sort of one end of the pendulum to the other. It is exciting to see that more and more companies are starting to take note and understand that there's a social and corporate responsibility that they have to do the right thing and to do things differently. That's why I so enjoy working with the colleges and universities and these upcoming classes of petroleum engineers who are going to be the future leaders in this space, in the not too distant future, to get them understanding. And what's fun and exciting is that you see that people truly do understand that we should leave it better than the way that we found it. That's just kind of a really core principle. And so, yeah, I would say that I'm encouraged by, the folks who are partnering and working with us. I don't see it as a greenwash at all. In fact, it's pretty straightforward. The numbers are the numbers. And as far as we're concerned, gosh, people who are participating and supporting us in the work that we're doing deserve all of the applause that is due to them, because they're the first ones who stepped out really took a bit of a chance on us, and we're super happy that they did. One of the things that's interesting, and being in the industry for as long as I have been, it's definitely nothing new, but the petroleum industry are really great followers, not such great leaders, it seems. And so it's fun to see now that a couple of sort of, broken out there, that more are following. And it's really also an opportunity for them to, like I said, to be involved in this narrative. And while they may not have been directly involved, it's a great way for them to step up and show that, that they can help to do things better. So no, I'm encouraged by that for sure.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other question? Well, Curtis, thank you so much on behalf of Bitterroot Climate Action. It's been fascinating to hear about your work. Thank you so much. And this recording will be, video will be archived on our website. If you're interested in finding out more or to donate, go to welldonefoundation.org and support Curtis. And we'll take it up. Maybe a group of us will come up sometime and take a look.
We'd love to have you, Peter, for sure, and anybody. And like I said, we've got lots going on up here all the time, and we'd love to continue to stay in touch and support you guys. And I would say also, conversely, if there's something that we can do to support, your activities there in the Valley, please let us know. I mean, again, we're all in this together, right? This is shared space. So
indeed it is. All right. Very good. Well, thanks everybody for attending. Great to have you here tonight. And thank you again, Curtis.
All right. Thanks, Peter. You bet. You guys. Hey, we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Bye-bye.